Hello, students. Hope you're doing well. Again, it's near the middle of the week, and I'm excited to visit with you. Even though it's on a video, it's still sweet. So, I'm doing well. My family is doing well. Yeah, I hope you guys are doing just fine also. As we move forward for Wednesday and Thursday of this week, I'm going to review a little bit of math for the fractions, and hopefully you remember what you learned on Monday. Today is just going to be recapping that. And then, of course, on Tuesday and then again on Thursday, you're doing reviews within your workbook. So this week is kind of more of a review week for math. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that we need to discuss before I move forward with the lesson. Science, you're going to learn a little bit about the different types of rock. And so there's a video, and there's going to be some things you're going to put in your workbook. Continue to do your first language lessons. None of that needs to be turned into me, but it's good to keep going with that. SWR is another review week for you. And then we're working on that new chapter in Latin. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying Secret Garden also. It's a great book. It's really fun to read, and the characters are really fun because they're all so different. So let's go ahead and pray, and then I'll get going with our lesson. Dear God, thank you so much for these third graders. And even though we're apart, we know that in you we have unity. And so I pray today that you would help us to continue to learn and serve you with how we're learning. I pray that our love for you would grow as we study about the world you created. Thank you so much that in you everything lives and moves and has its being, and in you everything finds its completion. And so thank you so much that math points to you, science points to you, even Latin points to you, because you are a God who created. And so thank you for this time together, and I pray you would help us focus. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, I want to go through a couple of review things first. One thing, I know in review 2, which was to be started on Tuesday, there was a word problem that looked a little unfamiliar. So I'm going to work that out here and explain it a little bit. This is a wonderful picture of a problem that you're going to be doing in the future for Singapore. To be honest, I'm not exactly sure why it was included in a review, but I'll go ahead and introduce that now. And so in your workbooks, it was review 2, and that's going to be found on page 49, but it was actually number 7, which was technically page 51. And if you want to, you can open up to that. But it's a kind of problem we haven't really come across yet. And it says the sum of two numbers is 180. If one number is twice as big as the other number, find the bigger number. So when we discuss word problems, remember how we've talked about finding the unit. So sometimes the unit can be a number of books, or the unit could be pencils or whatever. Well, the unit in this problem, again, this is number 7 for review 2. I'm going to write that up here so you know. Okay, the unit, I'm going to just draw a unit, is actually just going to be a number. Okay, so I hope you can see that. I'm going to try to scoot you a little closer so you can see that. The unit is actually going to be a number. So understanding that, our model drawing is going to look a little different. So we've got to be detectives. So the first thing we're going to ask is, what do we know? We know that the sum, what does sum mean? Ding, 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 addition. Okay? So when you add two numbers, the sum is going to be 180. But now we have a second part. If one number is twice as big as the other number, find the bigger number. Okay? So if we know that the sum of two numbers, and I'm going to draw it this way. If I know that the sum of these two numbers is going to be 180. And then I know that one number is twice as big as another number. I need to find this number. Okay? So this is completely different than what we've done, and it's okay if even after today this feels foggy, because I promise you, you're going to be doing problems like this in the grades to follow. So what we have are 3 equal units, okay? So what we're going to do you see how these two numbers and this number, they're all 3 equal units. So what we're going to do is we are going to divide by 3 to see what each of these units would be. So let's take 180 divided by 3. 3 goes into 18. How many times without going over? 6 minus 18 gives me 0 left, and then I need to bring down that 0. Remember, students, you don't just leave the ones place. You have to bring down that 0. And ask yourself, 3 goes into 0 how many times? And the answer is 0. So each of these 3 equal units is going to be worth 60. Okay? Now we have enough where we know that each of these units is 60, but the question is, what is the larger number? So to find that number, you take 60 plus 60, or 60 times 2, right? And you come up with the number 120. So writing out the sentence, you would say, the larger number is 120. Again, students, this was not something that they've really gone through. This has not been a unit that we've discussed. This is a problem. I think they're just checking to see how much can you understand these word problems. We're going to throw in this curveball and see. And so just know that this will be covered in years to come, but this is the basic setup of how to do this. All right? I'm going to transition now, and we're going to do one conversion review. As a heads up, we will be having a conversion quiz. I posted some sheets and handouts for you to practice, and that's going to help you out tremendously. It's not required, but it could be helpful for your quiz, okay? And again, we have spring break coming up, so this is not going to happen during spring break, but it will happen the week after spring break, and your parents will see that on the lesson plans. But let's go ahead and transition. We're going to review a conversion with addition. So I'm going to have 5 yards and 2 feet plus 2 feet equals how many yards and how many feet? Remember, when you do these reviews, you don't have to sit and do a lot of problems. Just do a couple a day and see, or maybe one a day, but see if you're understanding these, okay? So we're doing this one today, 5 yards and 2 feet plus 2 feet. Let's go ahead and add that all up. We end up with 5 yards and how many feet? 2 plus 2, 4 feet. How many feet are in a yard? 3. 3 feet in a yard. So, is this more than 3? So I have a yard in here, don't I? So what I need to do is make this 6 yards. And then what is 4 minus 3? I just brought 3 feet over here to make a yard. And then I have 1 foot left. Okay? All right. Now, we're going to quickly just discuss fractions again. So if you remember in your textbook, I'll give you some time to get that out. We were discussing pages 64, 65, and 66. So we're just going to briefly touch on that for a minute and make sure we're understanding a couple things, and then you'll be set up to do your assignment tomorrow, or today, I'm sorry, on Wednesday, which will be workbook exercise 28. And then, of course, Thursday is review. I think it's review 3 in your workbook. Okay, so remember when we were discussing fractions, we were talking about how we have a whole divided into parts. And a fraction shows us what we have for those parts if they're all cut up equally. So here's our pie. It was a whole, and they decided to slice it up into 5 pieces. So they had 2/5 on this plate and 3/5 on this plate. All right. Same thing with this watermelon. We had a whole and they wanted to break it up into equal parts. In fact, they wanted to divide it up into 8 equal parts. So on this plate, we had 3/8, and on this plate, we had 5/8. Now, very carefully, think through 2/5 and 3/5. Now, this is what we're doing. You had 2/5 on one plate, and you had 3/5 on another plate. This is essentially what you're doing. You're adding those, how many pieces, those 2 pieces and those 3 pieces, to give you a total for a whole, which is going to be 5/5. Essentially, you're adding those numerators, or those 2 pieces and 3 pieces, okay? Same thing with the watermelon. You have 3/8, and then you have 5/8, and all of those combined should give you one whole, and one whole is going to be 8 pieces out of the possible 8 pieces, much like one whole pie is going to be 5 pieces out of the possible 5 pieces. So then we transitioned to page 65, and I'm not going to go back through number 1 with you again, but we'll just briefly discuss number 2. It says that 3/8 of the bar is shaded, and so they wanted you to find what fraction of the bar is not shaded. Okay, if we know that one whole is going to be how many eighths? 8/8. We can find out, we can count, of course, they gave us a picture, but we can also figure out that 3/8 plus how many other eighths would give us one whole, or 8/8. Can you figure that one out, just as a review? So 3/8 plus blank would equal 8/8. Should I write it on the board? Well, it's kind of what we just did here, but I'm going to erase it so we have to think about it a little bit. There we go. 3/8 plus blank gives us 8/8. And that's going to be 5/8, because if you have 3 parts taken and you have a total of 8 parts, there's 5 parts that are not shaded. Okay? Again, we talked through a little bit of page 66 where we looked at pictures, and just for a brief, I'm going to hold this up a little closer, a brief review. F, you want to find out what fraction is shaded, and for F, we have a total of 6 parts, or 6 pieces, and 5 of them are shaded. So the fraction of what is shaded is going to be 5/6. Let's go ahead and move down just to number H, or letter H, because we've already done this. But how many total parts do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 total parts. How many of those parts are shaded? 7. So the fraction of what is shaded is going to be 7/10. Now, for your exercise tomorrow, which will be exercise, or for today, I should say. I'm sorry, I'm throwing myself off because I'm making this video early. So I'm actually making this on Tuesday. So the exercise that you're working on today, it's actually due at the end of the week, is exercise 28, and you're actually adding some fractions, okay? So all of these will have the common or same bottom number, okay? Do you remember we were introducing this term and we were saying this is the top number, and we call that the numerator? And we'll go through this again after spring break. And then the lower number was called the denominator. Okay? So all of these will have these in common. So let me just quickly explain. If I were to say I had 1/8 and another 1/8 and another 1/8, how many total eighths would I have? Well, how many eighths? 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. That would give me 3/8. Okay? We can do that with fifths. Let's take 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5. Excuse me for my handwriting. I'm going to add all that together. How many fifths do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. I have a total of 4 fifths. I want to introduce just one more term to you. And this actually, we've talked about it before in class because we were talking about this word called quarter, okay? So I'm going to write it on the board here. I'm going to erase this so that we can just really talk about this term quarter. Okay, so we have a coin called a quarter. How much is a quarter worth? Yeah, 25 cents, okay? Do you remember going through this? How many quarters are there in one whole dollar? If you're stuck, let's count by 25s. Remember we did this in class? 25, 50, 75, $1. Let's do it one more time. 25, 50, 75, $1. Whoa, 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 whoa. Let's just stop for a minute. How many quarters are there in $1? 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting. 4 quarters in $1. Next, do you remember we've been talking a little bit about clocks? Just at the beginning of class, there were a couple weeks that we just really wanted to talk about time and how to read an analog clock or a clock that doesn't just have the numbers, but you actually need to look at how the hands are facing. Remember, we have the hour hand and the longer minute hand. And we talked about this phrase, quarter, because we hear people say it all the time. It's a quarter after. It's a quarter till. Do you remember what I said? The clock is almost like a full circle, and you can think of it like a fraction. So look at this clock. Watch. When somebody says that it is a quarter after, I'm going to write. Remember how all these numbers go? In fact, if it throws you off, I'm just going to go like this. Okay. On a clock, this is where all the numbers go. And remember when I said if something is a quarter after, it means that the minute hand is going to be at the 3. Okay? If somebody says it's half past, that means, I'm going to do a different color so it's less confusing. That means the minute hand is pointing directly down at the 6. If somebody says it's a quarter till, that means that we have a minute hand pointing to the 9. Look at that. Look at our clock. Does that look like pictures we see often in fractions? You bet. There's 4 pieces. 1/4 of something is called quarter. So, if you were to look at exercise 28, look at number 1, letter B. You have 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. Sure, you can say 3/4. That's totally fine. But do you see what they did? Instead of saying the word fourths, they said the word quarters. Do you see that? If you were to turn the page and you saw 2a, it's the same thing. They divided it up into 4 parts. And instead of saying fourths, they said the phrase or the word quarters, okay? So hopefully that doesn't throw you off, but when you hear the word quarters, or quarters in fractions, you need to remember that they're talking about fourths, okay? So hopefully that's help making sense, and this will help you as you continue to learn more about fractions. And after spring break, we're going to pick up more on fractions, and I really enjoy fractions. I think this is going to be a fun unit. All right, students, have a great day. I miss you all. Wish I could be teaching your own, I shouldn't say your own faces, but I'd love to see your faces and teach you as people. But I just know I'm still teaching you. I just don't get to see your faces. But I still have so much joy getting to do this. I really care about you guys, and I miss you a lot. Have a wonderful day.